All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Right. Good morning. So today we are going to discuss about the operational risk, basically, right? Uh, so we have started discussing about the risk management, right? Now I think you are having a kind of idea about the risk management process, right? So since we are having an online session today, I'm going to discuss a kind of a small topic relating to your operational risk, right? So basically, when it comes to operational risk, what are the things the companies are doing? Let's say in your companies, within the company, if there's a risk arise, what kind of precautionary actions the companies is having? There's a one common name for that. Yes, anyone knows? Let's say there will be some risk within the company, like there's some operational issues, right? Right. To overcome that in a company level, what the company is doing? Yes. Since this is an online session, you have to engage with me, right? Not like physical class. I can't see you, no. Sometimes you guys are sleeping, sometimes you guys are watching TV, right? Yes. What is that common name we can use? Yes. Come on. Yes, Dinushi. What's that common name we can use? We call it as internal controls, right? Internal controls. If there's any kind of a risk rise within the company, like that means in the entity level, right? To overcome or to minimize or mitigate that sort of a risk, right? We are having the internal controls, right? In every organization, right? So in your assignment also, right? So you need to refer the annual report as I mentioned earlier, right? And you need to find out what kind of internal control mechanisms, right, they are having, right? So basically today I'm going to discuss with you uh, a kind of important topic relating to the entity level risk, right? So that is about the internal control framework. So what do you mean by a framework? Yes. What do you mean by a framework? So in the accounting also we are having the framework, right? Financial reporting framework. What's the purpose of that framework? Yes. Yes, Nishan. What's the purpose of that framework? Yes, Kumar. Yes. Yes, Kumar, go ahead. Yes, what's the purpose of that framework? Please answer.
Give the guidelines.
Give the guidelines. Okay, very good. Yes. Any other answer? Yes. Yes, others? No idea. So when it's come to the let's say a common one is financial reporting framework. I think most of you know that financial reporting framework. So financial reporting framework, what? It provides a foundation for the financial reporting, right? So if something is not there in the accounting standard, you have to refer the framework. So likewise, when you are having the internal, as we discussed the earlier discussion, right? So we are having the risk everywhere. We are having the risk, right? Right. As I told you, even though you are asleep on your bed, you are having a risk, right? So everywhere the risk is there, right? So how we are going to approach the risk, how we are going to tolerate the risk is that's the matter, right? That's how we are managing the risk, right? So therefore, when it comes to the businesses, if you are doing a business, definitely the risk is involving, right? So therefore, in the entity level, there definitely the risk is there, right? But if you are having a risk that if you are not tolerating the risk, if you are not managing the risk in the acceptable level, right, you can't do the business, right? definitely your business will be collapse, right? For that, in the entity level, right, not in a kind of a external level, but entity level within the business, right, you need to have specific internal controls, right? To when we are having an internal control, right? ඔගොල්ලොන්ට බෑ internal controls ගෙදර ඉන්න ගමන් මං හිතනවා මේකට දානවා මේ internal control එක, right? So when it's come to the companies, you can't do like that, right? So you need to follow some specific steps, right? Oh, there will be some guidance, as you correctly mentioned, right? That guidance is the internal control framework. So based on that internal control framework only, right? As a company, you need to establish the internal controls. You need to establish the internal controls. So this internal control framework is a kind of a guidance, right? So when you are establishing the internal controls of the company, that will be the guidance to the managerial people, right? All right. I have just uploaded Tute to the LMS. Sorry for that, right? So next week onwards, I will upload the Tute on time. Right. Can you all see my screen? Yeah? Can see?
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you. So internal control framework. So today we are going to discuss, right? Identify different internal control and governance frameworks and apply the internal control and governance frameworks in the real business world, right? Or real world business scenarios, right? So that's what we are going to learn. So actually this subject is a kind of a practical subject, right? Even though it's a boring, as I told you in the first session, even though it's a boring, but this is a practical subject, right? Because if you want to become a CEO, CFO someday, so that should be your final goal, right? Right. Sometimes in age of 40, 50, you can be a CEO and CFO, right? So if you have become a CEO and the CFO, right? So this knowledge is very important. The risk management, governance, and ethics, how you need to manage the risk in the company, how you are going to govern the company, how you maintain the ethics, right? These two are kind of a fundamentals to develop your company into the next level, right? Right. So when you are looking at the outline, so we are going to discuss about the internal control background and the purpose and objective of the framework, overview of the framework, and finally the framework, right? So this is the acceptable framework worldwide for the internal control mechanism in a company. So if you are going to establish the internal control mechanism to a company, so this is the framework acceptable in worldwide. So we call it as, sometimes you heard about this framework, COSO framework, right? COSO framework, right? COSO framework, right? So what do you mean by the COSO is it's a kind of a commission, right? Right? Kind of a commission which comprise with 5 organizations, right? 5 organizations: American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, AICPA, American Accounting Association, Financial Executive Internationals, Institute of Internal Auditors, and Institute of Management Accountants, right? All these five, what do you call the bodies has been engaged and developed a kind of a framework for the companies to follow when they are establishing the internal controls, right? So that we call it as COSO framework, right? Right? That's we call it as COSO framework. So that's the background of this framework, which is not very much important, but you have to know it, right? So why we need to have COSO framework? What is the requirement, right? Internal controls help entities to achieve important objectives and sustain and improve performance. Right? Through the internal controls, what we are doing? We are basically managing the entity level risk. Right? Right? Entity level risk. Right? So when we are managing the entity level risk, right, it will give us some benefits, right? And also it will help to companies to go for a foreseeable future. And also company's performance will be increased, right? So therefore, internal controls is very important to the company. Definitely, every company needs to have an internal control, right? ලෝකේ කොහෙවත් company එකක් නැහැ internal controls නැතුව. right? ඔගොල්ලෝ දැකලා තියෙනවද මට කියන්න. right? එහෙම internal controls නැතුව company එකක් තියෙන්න ඕන නම්, right? මේ ලෝකේ ඉන්න හැම මිනිස්සයම එක වගේ වෙන්න ඕන. right? එක thinking pattern එක තියෙනවා නම් ඔන්න internal controls අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. But when it comes to the volatility of the business and the humans are not ethical, everything is corrupted. So definitely the internal controls needs to be there to business to survive. If there is a no internal control, that means what? Your company will not last longer for 5 minutes. It will goes down definitely, right? So therefore, the COSO internal control integrated framework enables organization to effectively and efficiently develop a system of internal control. So this framework, what is the importance of this framework? It provides some guidance, right, to the organization people when they are developing the system of internal control, to develop a kind of effective and efficient system of internal control, right? So they can use this COSO framework, right? They can use this COSO framework, right? Because we need to have a kind of effective and efficient develop efficient and effective system of control to what? To address the risk, right? And manage it to the acceptable level, right? As I told you, right? We can't fully eliminate the some risks. We can't eliminate the risk. What we can do, we can manage the risk for the acceptable level. If it is goes beyond the acceptable levels, then company can't survive, right? To survive, to have the sustainability, right? What we can do, we have to manage the risk kind of acceptable level. So then only we can survive in the market, because the market is highly volatile, right? The framework assists management, board of directors, external stakeholders, and other integrating with the entity in their respective duties regarding internal controls without being overly prescriptive, right? So what that means, through the course of framework, everyone in the organization, everyone who is engaging with the organization activities, right, know their responsibilities, right? So that is why this course of framework, the following the course of framework is very important. So when you are doing your assignment, when you are referring your annual report, so you can see, right, they are following this internal control framework called COSO when they are building up their internal control framework for their company, right? So these are the reasons why we need to have a COSO like framework like COSO to develop the internal control system to the company, right? Is it clear? Is it clear? Yes, guys, is it clear? Don't make it boring, okay? Yes, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. So the benefits which the internal control framework or the COSO framework provide for the management and the board of directors, right? It says means to apply internal controls to any type of entities regardless of industry or legal structure and the level of entity, operating unit or functions, right? So by using this framework, right, this framework can apply for any type of entity, whether it's a manufacturing company, whether it's a service company, right? Whether it's a diversified company, anything, right? You can apply this framework, right? Regardless of the industry or the legal structure, you can apply, even though it's a partnership, even though it's a company, even though it's a sole proprietorship, right? You can apply, right? And also a principle-based approach that provides flexibility and allows for judgment in designing, implementing, and conducting internal control. Principles that can be applied at the entity, operating, and the functional level. Right. So this framework is a principle-based framework, right? But it provides, if it's a principle-based framework, the flexibility is not there, right? But it provides some flexibility. So then you can use some judgmental thing, right? And you can do some designing and implementing and conducting internal controls with the judgments, right? Requirement for an effective system of internal control by considering how component and the principles are presented and functioning and how components operates together. So don't worry about this component and principle, I will teach you, right? A mean to identify and analyze risk and to develop and manage appropriate responses to the risk within acceptable level, right? So this framework helps us to identify risk and provide some risk responses to mitigate the risk into an acceptable level, right? An opportunity to eliminate ineffective, redundant, or ineffective controls that provide minimal value in reducing risk to the achievement of their entities' objectives, right? Right. So through this internal control framework, so these are the benefits that provide to the management and board of directors, right? Or else we can say for the entity, right? Through this framework, right? Through this framework. And for the stakeholders of the entity, that means stakeholders means අපි කියන ඇල්මැති පාර්ශ්වය. කම්පැනි ගැන බලන් ඉන්න කට්ටිය. right? දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ වගේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ ගැන ඇල්මැති පාර්ශ්වයේ ඉන්නවනේ. අම්මලා තාත්තලා ඉන්නවා. right? 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 girlfriend, boyfriend ඉන්නවා. So they are looking at you, stakeholders. right? What you are doing. right? right? ඔයාලා ඉගෙන ගන්නවද නැත්නම් නිදාගෙන ඉන්නවද? right? right? නැත්නම් වෙන වැඩක් කර කර ඉන්නවද? right? phone එකකින් game එක ගා ඉන්නවද? right? So they are watching at you, right? So likewise in the companies also there are some external people who is looking at the company. So we call them as external stakeholders, right? External stakeholders. So what external stakeholders are expecting from us? They are expecting the outcomes. Okay. So let's say if the shareholders are looking at the dividend, shareholders looking at the capital gain. So if you take the government is looking at the tax. Government is looking at the how your company is performing and how your company generating some income to the GDP, right? So therefore they are having a different expectations. They are looking at the outcomes, right? So therefore, through the internal control framework, right? So what are the benefits they are having? Their confidence level will be built up. Greater confidence in the board of directors oversight of the internal control system. Right. So if there's a good internal control system, right, right, they are okay with that. Okay with the company. For example, shareholders are investing their money into the company. Right. Shareholders are company salary dana. Right. But they are not going to control the business. They are appointing the people on behalf of them, like managers, right? CEOs, directors, likewise. Right. So those people are doing the management. So therefore, I think Malin sir discussed this. There will be some conflict of interest, right? Conflict of interest. Conflict of interest කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? අවිශ්වාසය කියන එක තව වචනයක් තමයි conflict of interest කියන්නේ. Management එක විශ්වාස කරන්නේ නැහැ directors ලා. Right? So how that confidence level or that conflict of interest can be mitigated? Through good internal controls to enhancing the confidence of the shareholders, right? So one way to do that is internal control, right? Because they think, there will be a good internal control framework. So that means the board of directors are oversighting the internal controls very well. Great confidence regarding the achievement of entities' objectives, right? So the objectives also, make sure that object also achieved because you are having good internal controls within your organization. Great confidence in the organization ability to identify, analyze, and respond to the risk and changes in the business and operating environment. Right? right? How we are going to identify the risk? Because I told you, right? If you are not identifying the risk correctly, that is the biggest risk you are having, right? So greater confidence in organization, ability to identify, analyze, and respond to the risk and changes in the business and operating environment, right? Great understanding of the requirement effectively and system of control, right? Great understanding of the requirement of effective system control, right? So now, based on the internal control framework, you can understand, right, what kind of requirement you are having regarding the internal control, right? Then, great understanding that through the use of judgment, management may be able to eliminate the ineffective, redundant, or inefficient controls, right? So through this internal control framework, right, we can identify, right, what are the ineffective, redundant, or inefficient controls we are having now, right? So then what we can do, we can eliminate those controls, right? Sometimes even though we are having the internal controls within your organization, so those internal controls may not be performed effectively, right? So therefore you have to identify them, right? උදාහරණයක් විදිහට ඕගොල්ලෝගේ ගෙදරට හොරු පයින්නවා කියලා හිතාගෙන, right? right? ඔයගොල්ලෝ ගෙදර බල්ලෙක් ගේනවා, right? බල්ලෙක් ගේනවා. ටික දවසක් ඇද්දි මොකද වෙන්නේ බල්ලා? බල්ලා ඔක්කොමත් එක්ක යාළු වෙනවා. right? උට මස් කට්ටක් දුන්නාට පස්සේ ඕගොල්ලෝ මොකුත් දෙන්නේ නැති හින්දා ඌ වෙන කට්ටිය දෙන මස් කටු ගාලා ඌ හැමොත් එක්කම යාළු වෙනවා. එතන මොකද වෙන්නේ? හොරාට ඕන නම් ඌට මස් කට්ටක් දීලා ගෙදරට එන්න පුළුවන්. right? Even though the control is there, it is not effective, right? Even though you are having an internal control, it's not effective. So therefore, what you have to do, you need to eliminate those things. So otherwise, even though let's say you are thinking like, we are having a good internal control, but that internal control is not effective, right? For example, let's say you are thinking like you are having a good password for your Facebook, right? Right? You are thinking like a good password for your Facebook, but you are writing that password in everywhere, right? In your mobile phone, the password is same. In your LMS, the password is same, right? And likewise, right? So what will happen? Even though you are having control, sometimes that control is not effective, right? Right. So therefore, you need to eliminate such kind of a risk. To identify such kind of a internal controls, this internal control framework will help you, right? So read these things, get some understanding what we have discussed. Right. So then you need to know what's the meaning of the internal control, right? මොකද්ද මේ internal control එක කියන්නේ? නැත්නම් අපි කියන සිංහලෙන් අභ්‍යන්තර පාලනය කියලා, right? So when it comes to internal control, you think like only a CCTV camera, password, right? Or let's say when it comes to your resident to what you call protect from the thief, right? You can have a dog, right? So now when you're looking at this internal control, you think like a kind of a specific thing. But when it comes to internal control, it is a process, right? You can't establish the internal control in a kind of isolated event. It's a kind of a process, right? Internal control is a process, right? It's a process affected by the entity's board of directors, managers, and other personnel designed to provide the reasonable assurance, right? Through the internal controls, what we are having, we are providing a reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives relating to the operation, reporting, and the compliance, right? So there are a few important points here. One is internal control is a process, right? So through this process, it provides the reasonable assurance. What do you mean by reasonable assurance? Reasonable assurance. What do you mean by that? In auditing, we are using this reasonable assurance and the absolute assurance. So what is the difference between the reasonable assurance and the absolute assurance? Yeah. So what is the difference between the reasonable assurance and the absolute assurance? What the reasonable assurance? Guys, please talk. You guys are not talking, right? මේ බැච් එක විතරයි කතා කරන්නේ නැත්නම් මම ෆස්ට් වීක් එකේ මේක නෝට් කරා. මම කලින් කරපු බැචස් ඔක්කොම හොඳට කතා කරනවා. Yes. What do you mean by reasonable assurance? Can you remember? You have learned this in auditing. If you have learned auditing in the SAP or somewhere else. Reasonable assurance is what? So when it comes to reasonable assurance, it's a kind of a high level assurance. For example, right? මට බෑ කවුරු හරි දැකපු ගමන් කියන්නේ එයා හොඳයි නරකයිද කියලා. right? එහෙමනම් මට වෙනම ඥානයක් තියෙනවා. right? එතකොට මට බෑ එයා ගැන assurance එකක් දෙන්න. right? හැබැයි මං එයා ගැන දේවල් හොයලා right? හිතන්නකෝ හැම දෙයක්ම හෙව්වා කියලා. right? හැම දෙයක් ගැනම හෙව්වා. මට එයා ගැන 100% assurance එකක් දෙන්න බෑ. right? සමහරලාට හැංගුණු දේවල් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. right? මට හම්බෙලා තියෙන පොඩි සාම්පල් එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. right? උදාහරණයක් විදිහට දැන් ඉන්නෝ පිරිමි ළමෙක් ඉන්නවා. right? අපි එක්සැම්පල් එකක් right? පිරිමි ළමෙක් ඉන්නවා. ඒ පිරිමි ළමයා මේ හිතන්න මේ පිරිමි ළමෙක් කියලා හරි මේ ඉන්දියානු ළමෙක් කියලා හිතන්න. මට එච්චර drawings බෑ. right? එතකොට පිරිමි ළමයා ගෑනු ළමයට කැමතියි. right? පොඩි කැමැත්තක් තියෙනවා. right? පොඩි කැමති ඒත් මොකද කියන්නේ ආසයි බයයි. right? කැමති අහන්න බෑ. right? එතකොට එයා මොකද කරන්නේ? එයාට මතක් වෙනවා මේකට ඉන්නවා හොඳ එක්කෙනෙක්. මරු පොරක් කියලා කිව්වොත් අපි. right? යාළුවෙක් ඉන්නවා. ඒ යාළුවාට හොඳ connections තියෙනවා ගෑනු ළමයි එක්ක. හරි ගෑනු ළමයි එක්කම තමයි. So he will appoint him. right? Ask him to come and මචං මෙහෙමයි කේස් එක මම මේ ගෑනු ළමයට කැමතියි. පොඩ්ඩක් මට මේක හොයලා දෙන්න පුළුවන්ද මේ ගෑනු ළමයා හොඳයිද කියලා. Whether this girl good or bad. right? So now what he do he will go to so he's starting the investigation, right? He goes and asks from this girl's mother. Not the mother. අම්මගේ හොතෙන් බුටි ගන්නවා. right? එයා ගෙදර ආන්ටිගෙන් අහනවා. right? එයාගෙදර ආන්ටිගෙන් අහනවා. right. එයාගෙදර ආන්ටි කියනවා ඒ ගෑනු ළමයා හොඳයි මේ කතා කරනවත් ඇහෙන්නේ අපිට. හරිම හොඳයි කියලා කියනවා. right. right. ඊට පස්සේ යාළුවගෙනුත් අහනවා හොඳම යාළුවා. right. හොඳම යාළුවත් කියනවා ගෑනු ළමයා හරි හොඳයි. කිසි ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. හොඳයි මගේ හොඳම යාළුවා කියලා කියනවා. So based on this evidence, right? So your friend coming to you and provide a feedback, provide an opinion, right? That opinion, he says, this girl is good, right? So now he's having a kind of perception regarding this girl. So now, based on the what do you call feedbacks provided by the friend, now there's a perception is built, right? But so let's say now this boy is asked out from this girl, and then they got married, and few years gone, then they got married. Right? So after the marriage, right, what will happen? Right? මේ ගෑනු ළමයට පරිප්පුවක් අත දාගන්න බෑ. right? බැන්න දවස් ඉඳන් බයි. කන්ටවත් ඇහෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා කතා කරන්න කිව්වට ඒ උනට කන්ටවත් ඇහෙන්නේ නෙමෙයි මුළු ගමටම ඇහෙන ගයි. right? So what will happen? Right? What will happen? So this boy is not provided absolute assurance. That means 100% assurance. Absolute assurance we can't do. We can't provide the absolute assurance. Right. So what we can do is we can provide a kind of a reasonable assurance based on the quality of the information. So here he collect the information, the information is not collect. So not quality. So that is why it also not a reasonable assurance. So if it is a reasonable assurance, you need to have a quality evidence, quality information, right? Quality outcome, right? Then only you can provide a reasonable assurance. So therefore, through the internal controls, it's a process. What we are expecting is a reasonable assurance. To have the reasonable assurance, what we need to have? We need to have a quality internal control, right? We need to have a quality internal control. And also, through the internal controls, we are achieving three objectives, right? අපි business එකට internal controls දාන්නේ මෙන්න මේ කියන objectives තුන achieve කරන්න. So what are the objectives? The first one is operational objective, right? The second one is reporting objective, and the final one, the compliance objective, right? Compliance objective, operating, reporting, and the compliance. So what do you mean by operating objective when it comes to company? What do you mean by that? Operating. What do you mean by operating an objective? Yes. Internal control එකක් business එකට දාද්දී, right? අපි හදනවනේ internal control මම කියන්නේ password එකක්, CTCT camera එකක්, නැත්නම් protocol එකක්, right? මේ ඕන කියන internal control එකක් දාද්දී අපිත් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා objectives තුනක් achieve කරන්න. right? මෙන්න මේ objectives තුන ඇති වෙන්න ඕන. එකක් තමයි operational objective. අනිත් එක තමයි reporting objective එක. අන්තිම එක තමයි compliance objective. So we need to achieve these three objectives. What are they? So through the internal control framework, we are going to achieve these three objectives. The first one is operational objective. What do you mean by operational objective? Right, operational objective. What is our operational objective? To efficiently and effectively, right, perform the entity's operation, right, by focusing on operational and financial goals. And also you can safeguard the assets against the loss. right? දැන් business එකක් ගත්තොත් එහෙම business එක ඇතුලේ operations වෙනවා. right? අපි ගමුකෝ manufacturing business එකක්. So we are taking, if you are taking a manufacturing company, what manufacturing company is doing? They are taking the raw material and they are doing some process and they are having the outcome or the output, right? So it will be it is there some kind of a process, right? To effectively and efficiently have this process, right? With the operational and financial goals. And also you need to safeguard the assets, but you need to have the Internal controls. Right? Then the reporting objectives. Reporting objectives. So once you have performed something related to financial or non-financial thing, you have to report it. Right? We have to report it. So when you are reporting it, right, you have to report it in a good way, right? You know, according to the financial reporting framework, right? You need to report the things reliably, timeline, right? Transparency, right? Right? And you need to address the accounting standard setters requirement. Like when you are doing the SLFR 16, you need to follow the guidelines. You are doing the SLFR revenue recognition, you need to follow the guidelines, right? To follow the guidelines, you need to have the internal controls to check whether these guidelines has been followed. That's why the auditors are there. That's why the internal auditors are there. Right? They are making sure that the financial statements are presented through a fair view. So that's a kind of internal control. Right? Through that internal control, we are achieving the reporting objectives. Right? So then finally, we are having the compliance objectives. Right? Right. So one of the key role nowadays in a company is the compliance officer. Right? So you can be a compliance officer, highly paid job in Sri Lanka nowadays. Compliance. Right? What the compliance officer is doing? The compliance officer is doing by they are checking the compliance. For example, let's say a bank, right? The compliance officer in a bank, what he or she is doing, right? They are looking at the compliance which is required to the company, right? Required for the bank, and check whether the bank is performing that compliance, right? So otherwise, what will happen if you are not comply with the rules and regulations? If you are not following the quality control regulations, right? So sometimes you have to close your business, right? Not only rules and regulations, but also some conditions with your partnerships, right? What happened to the McDonald's, right? What happened to the McDonald's in Sri Lanka? There's an internal control breach is there. So they are not achieving the compliance objectives, right? Right. They are not maintaining the franchise quality in the McDonald's outlets. So that's why they have closed the McDonald's, right? Now you can't see the McDonald's in Sri Lanka, right? So that's the issue. The compliance objective is not achieved through the internal controls, right? In the McDonald's, right? They are having a partnership or they are having a kind of a franchise agreement, right? So the franchise agreement, it says you need to maintain this if you are taking a product, let's say a burger, right? So you need to maintain this much of quality, right? When you're making the burger. But in Sri Lanka, because of the internal control deficiencies they are having within the Sri Lankan McDonald's company, they are not achieving that. Right? So what will happen? It will not achieve the compliance objectives through the framework, through the internal controls. So that's why they are closed. So therefore, if you are not achieving any of these objectives through your internal controls, right? Right. For example, one internal control is addressing one objective sometimes, right? Sometimes one internal control will address all the objectives, right? So likewise, if you are not achieving the objectives in the satisfactory level, right? Definitely your company will be collapsed. So that is why studying this is very important, right? As a managerial people, right? As a business people, as a managerial people, as a CFO, if you have become a CEO, CFO, definitely this knowledge is very important, right? එතකොට ඔයා කවදා හරි CEO කෙනෙක් වුණොත් ඔයා දන්නවා කම්පැනි එකට ඉන්ටර්නල් කන්ට්‍රෝල් එකක් දාද්දි මෙන්න මේ කියන ෆ්‍රේම්වර්ක් එකේ යන්න ඕනේ. බැරි වෙලා අපිට ඉන්ටර්නල් කන්ට්‍රෝල් එක නැති වුණොත් මෙන්න මේ කියන ඔබ්ජෙක්ටිව්ස් ඇඩ්‍රස් කරන්න අපේ කම්පැනි එකට සර්වයිව් වෙන්න බෑ. For example, you are not paying the tax properly. What will happen? Definitely government will act against you, right? So to maintain these objectives within that framework, you have to have the good internal controls within your company, right? To have these internal controls, you need to follow this framework, right? Right. So now I'm coming to the best part, components of the internal control. So or we can say this is the framework we are going to learn, right? This is the examinable point, right? I will test in your examination. Definitely, I will test this part in your examination, right? So let's have a kind of a 2 to 3 minutes break and join again, okay? We are starting the components of internal controls. Right. So this is the course of framework, right? You have to learn, right? So when it comes to the internal control, as I told you before, the ඔයගොල්ලෝ හිතන්න ඔයගොල්ලෝ company එක CEO කෙනෙක් කියලා. Just think you are CEO, right? How you are going to establish the internal control for your company? Let's say there is a issue regarding the there are some issues regarding your operational activities, right? Then ගත්තොත් එහෙම company එකේ operational activities වල frauds වෙනවා, right? කවුරු හරි materials හොරකම් කරන් යනවා, right? දැන් process එක වෙන්නේ raw materials එනවා, right? process එකේ යනවා ඊට finish goods විදියට deliver වෙනවා. ඔන්න ඔය කියන process එක ඇතුලේ frauds වෙනවා, right? raw materials අඩු වෙනවා, right? ඊට පස්සේ සමහරලා process එකේදී හරියට quality එකට වෙන්නේ finish goods deliver කරද්දී සමහරලාට හදපු ඒවාට වඩා ගාණ අඩුයි, right? තියෙන ප්‍රමාණය අඩුයි. ඔන්න වගේ issues තියෙනවා. There will be so much of frauds. So what kind of a controls, internal controls mechanism you can have? Yes, for example, මොන වගේ control mechanisms තියෙන්න පුළුවන්? Yes, any examples? Yes. හරි. අපි ඒකත් අමතක කරමු. අපි හිතමු දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝගේ ගෙදර ගමුකෝ. Right, let's say you are resident. Right. Then there is a risk that some people there are some gang around your house. So they are usually what they are doing is they are stealing people's money, right? They are breaking the houses and coming and steal money, right? Right. There's a risk, right? What you can do to mitigate this risk or to minimize this risk to the acceptable level? Just what you can do. ඔයාලගේ ගේ වටේට හොරු ඉන්නවා, right? ගේ හිතමු ගමේ, right? ගමේ හොරු ඉන්නවා. එතකොට දැන් හොරුන්ගෙන් ඔයාලගේ ගෙදර ආරක්ෂා කරනවට මොකක්ද කරන්න පුළුවන්? Yes, what you can do?
CCTV use කරන්න පුළුවන්, security system එකක් දාලා තියන්න පුළුවන්.
Okay, CCTV දාන්න පුළුවන්, security system එකක් දාන්න පුළුවන්. Very good. What is the first step you are taking? You are taking a CCTV camera or security cam. Yes, any other thing? I'm asking what is the first step you are following if such kind of situation is there? Yes. Just correct CCTV and security camera. Yes, okay. Other than that, what is the first step you need to follow? That's why you need to follow this framework, right? So this CCTV camera, security camera, security sort of items will come under the control activities. That means the third step of this course of framework. So what is the first step? So let's say if you're having such kind of situation in your house, right? So there are so much of people, there's a gang, right? So what is the first control activity you can do? Sorry, first step of the internal control system. First of all, you need to clear up your control environment, right? So that is what you have to do. What do you mean by control environment? The environment which you can control, right? The environment which you can control, right? What you can do? You can establish the ethical values, right? You can have the integrity, you can have the accountability of the people. දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝගේ ගමේ ඉන්න ඔයාලා පාලනය කර හැකි පිරිසව පොඩ්ඩක් එකතු කරගන්න ඕන. එකතු කරගෙන ඒගොල්ලන්ට කියන්න ඕන මෙන්න මෙහෙම ඉෂුව එකක් තියෙනවා අපි මේකට එකතු වෙලා වැඩ කරමු කියලා. Right. So you need to first of all clear up your control environment before having the CCTV. So now your control environment is okay, let's say. The control environment is okay. The internal environment is okay. Right? They are get together. Then Second step, then you have to assess the risk. Right. Right. What assess කරන්න ඕන ඔයගේ risk එක. දැන් ඔයාගේ ගෙදර තියෙන්නේ ගමේ අයිනෙමයි. අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම හොරු කඩන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථා වැඩි. ඒ වගේම ගමේ වැඩිපුරම සල්ලි තියෙන ඔයාලට. Right. So there will be a high probability. The risk is high. Right. නැත්තම් සමහරලාට තව එක්කෙනෙක්ගේ වගේ හොඳම යාළුවෙක් ගෙදර තියෙන්නේ පොලිසිය ගාවමයි. ගමේ පොලිසිය ගාවමයි. Right. එතකොට එයාට තියෙන risk එක අඩුයි. Low risk. Right. So therefore, as a second step, you need to, what you have to do? You need to assess the risk. Right. If you are having a risk, you need to assess the risk, whether this risk is at which level, whether it's a high level risk, lower level risk, or middle level risk. So after assessing the risk at the second point, then only you need to establish the control activities. Right. For example, you can have a CCTV camera because you are having the high risk. You can have a dog because you are having a high risk. Right. But your friend, he only want to have a door lock. Right. That is his control activity. So based on the risk assessment, you can decide, right, what is the control activity you are required. So therefore, if such kind of a situation is arise, the first step is not to having the control activities. First step is to clear up your control environment. ඔයාට පාලනය කර හැකි පරිසරය ඔයා මුලින්ම clear up කරගන්න ඕනේ. Then you need to assess the risk. What are the risks I'm having? What kind of a risk I'm having, and what are the levels of those risks? And based on this level of risk, and based on this, the basis of the risk, you need to establish the control activities. That is the third point. Right. Even though you have the control activities, you need to communicate it. You need to inform it. Right. Right. For example, if you plug the CCTV camera in your house to have more protection, you can inform it to the villagers. අපේ ගෙදරට CCTV camera හයි කරලා තියෙන. ඉන්න බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. එතකොට ඒ gang එකට news එක යනවා. ඒ ගෙදරට පයින්න හොඳ නැහැ. ඒ ගෙදරට CCTV camera හයි කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව ඔයා internally ඔයාගේ පවුලේ කට්ටිය කියලා බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. CCTV camera හයි කරලා තියෙනවා. Right. Information and communication. Even though you are having the control activities, if you are not inform it and communicate, that will be not effective. Right. Then afterward, you have to do the ongoing monitoring. For example, let's say you can sleep peacefully because you are having now CCTV cameras. Right? Don't worry about that gang. CCTV camera එකක් තියෙනවා බය වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ හොඳට නිදාගත්තා කියලා නිදා ගන්න. But what will happen? Suddenly the CCTV camera will not work. Right? So what we have to do? We have to do the monitoring. We need to go back and check whether the control activity is performing effectively. If it is not performing effectively, you need to again go to the control environment and assess the risk. Again, you have to adjust your control activities. So that is why the internal control is, we call it as a process, not a single isolated component. If it is a single isolated component, then we can see fixing a CCTV camera. But having the internal control is a process. First of all, you need to look at the control environment, risk assessment, control activities, then you have to communicate, and finally you have to monitor it. Right. So these are the main 5 components, right, you need to have when it comes to the internal control framework under the COSO framework. Right. Right. So you have to remember this. So if you apply this to the company, right, මම general example එකක් ගත්තේ, right, day-to-day example එකක් ගත්තේ. If you apply this to the what you call the company, think about company. Right, think about company. So now this company is having issues regarding the operational process. So they are having the raw material process and the final good, right? So finished good, right? So in this process, right, there will be some frauds can be happen. Like they brought the raw materials thousands, but when it comes to the warehouse, only 950 is there. 50 is missing. Right? When they are doing the process, some raw material, some process technological qualities is not there. Right? People are doing what they want, right? And when it comes to when it comes to the finished good, right? When they are going to deliver, there will be a mismatch with the order and the delivery note, right? Right. So there will be so much of frauds. So in such kind of situation, what is the first thing we have to do? What's the first thing we have to do? මේ වගේ ඉෂුව එකක් තියෙන කම්පැනි එක අපි මුලින්ම මොකද කරන්න ඕන? දැන් අපි හදන්නේ මේ කම්පැනි එකට ඉන්ටර්නල් කන්ට්‍රෝල් ස්ටැබ්ලිෂ් කරන්න. What is the first step we have to do? Yes. What we have to do first? මොකද අපි මුලින්ම කරන්න? Huh? What we have to do first? Yes, guys. First of all, we need to look at the control environment. අපිට පාලනය කර හැකි environment එක දිහා බලන්න ඕනේ. දැන් මේකේදී ගොඩක් fraud ලා දින්නේ because people are not ethical. Right. So we have to give the training to the people to become ethical. You need to be ethical. And accountability is not there. For example, the operation manager is accountable for having the good process. Accountability was not there. And managers are not committed. They are not integrity. They are not having the integrity. They are not honest. Right. So you have to establish those things first. Then Lanka, right? Lanka Ranjan Ramanayaka is providing a good statement. That's a correct statement. Right? අපි ඔක්කොම හොරු මටි. හොරු කවද්ද හොරු අල්ලන්නේ. Right? Right. What that mean? That means what is the correction points he is mentioning? He is mentioning about the control environment. Right? Even though we are having a nicely drafted financial regulations in Sri Lanka, there is a nicely drafted financial regulations. Right? When you are doing the government procurement, you need to call tenders, and these are tender procedures. This is how you need to follow it. Everything is clearly there. That means the control activity is clearly there. The policies and procedures are clearly there. But still, the fraud is happening. Right? Why? Because they are not addressing the control environment. People are not ethical. People are doing frauds. Even though you are having a good control activities, right? Like, for example, like Sri Lanka, right? We are having a nicely drafted policies, nicely drafted, what do you call the protocols, right? Even though these things are there, if people are not ethical, people are not committed to what they are doing, people are not accountable, so still the fraud can be happen. Still, the internal control deficiencies can be happened. So therefore, that's why in the course of framework, they are suggesting as a first step, you need to firstly clear up the environment which you can control. Right? In this process, what you have to do is you need to firstly make the people ethical and make the people accountable for what they are doing. Then you need to identify the risk and assess the risk accordingly. So for example, there is a risk in the raw material deficiency, right? So you have to assess that risk, whether that risk is high, low, or medium. So based on that, let's say that risk is very high risk. So therefore, you need to establish the control activity to address that high risk. Let's say it is a low risk, then you need to decide the control activity to address that low risk. Right? Then after having the control activity, let's say you are having a good, as a control activity, you can have a good process plan, good procedure plan, or good protocols regarding the operations. මෙන්න මේ විදිහට තමයි මේ විදිහට වෙන්න ඕනේ, මේක සයින් වෙන්න ඕනේ මෙහෙම, මේ විදිහට පාස් වෙන්න ඕනේ, right? මේ විදිහට සිස්ටම් එකේ සයින් කරන්න ඕනේ මෙයා චෙක් කරලා තමයි මේක මෙතනට යන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ඩිෆිෂියන්සි එකක් තියෙනවා නම් එතනින්ම කැප්චර් කරගන්න ඕනේ. මේ විදිහට ප්‍රොටෝකෝල් එකක් හදන්න ඕනේ. So that is the control activity. So once you have made the control activity, what you have to do? You need to inform it to the external parties as well as internal parties. Right? Right. You need to inform the quality information, the correct information to the internal parties as well as external parties. දැන් ප්‍රොටෝකෝල් එකක් හදුවා කියලා ඒක තියාගෙන ඉන්න හරියන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක කියන්න ඕනේ එම්ප්ලොයිස් ලට. ඊට පස්සේ ඔයගොල්ලෝ මේ process එක කරද්දී මෙන්න මේ ප්‍රොටෝකෝල් එක follow කරන්න. මේ ප්‍රොටෝකෝල් එක follow කරේ නැත්නම් ඔයගොල්ලෝ interdict කරනවා. Right? Right. So you have to inform. Even though you are having a good financial regulations in Sri Lanka, most of the government officials don't know about government protocols, financial regulations. So what will happen? They are doing whatever they want, right? So the next step is information and communication. You need to communicate and info to the required people, right? Even if it is external or internal, you have to inform them. Then final process is you have to monitor it, because we are living in a volatile environment. Suddenly the environment can be changed, right? Suddenly in 2020, suddenly the COVID-19 comes, right? So what happened? Then we have to make some amendments, right? We have to make some amendments. For example, in 2021, when the COVID-19 came to Sri Lanka, so I'm doing audit in Ultratech cement, right? Ultratech cement, right? Right. So Ultratech cement, when I'm doing Ultratech cement, so our one of our challenge is to review our subordinate. So when you're doing the audit, normally the supervisor is reviewing the work of others, right? So when the COVID-19 is coming up, the isolators is happen, right? Even though we are working online, it is very difficult to review, very difficult to monitor. So we need to think about some control activities for that. So that is why this monitoring activity is coming up, right? Through the monitoring activity, we can look at whether the established internal controls, the established internal controls are going accordingly, right? Going accordingly. If it is not going accordingly, again, you need to go to the control environment, whether there is any kind of a deficiency. You need to find out what is the issues regarding this deficiency. So what you can do, you can go to the control environment and find out there's any kind of concern regarding the control environment to result in that kind of a deficiency, right? If it is not there, then you have to assess the risk because of this deficiency, right? You need to assess the risk which has been generated because of this deficiency. Then only again you have to amend the control activity. So that is why this is an ongoing process. That is why we call it as internal control is a process. Is it clear? Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So when it comes to the components and objectives of the internal controls, right? This is a Corso framework cube, right? Corso framework cube, right? So what that mean? So this cube represent the entity, a company, right? In a company, we are having three different objectives: operational objective, reporting objective, compliance objective within a company, right? And also in a company, we are having a company level. We are having some divisions. We are having some operational units. We are having some functional units. Functional unit says HR function, finance function, likewise. Operating unit, we can have assembling unit, we can have a production unit, likewise. In a division, we can have a finance division, likewise. In entity level, that means whole entity, right? So when you're looking at this, you can see this operational thing is having in all the entity levels and divisional levels, right? And when it comes to operational objective, to achieve the operational objective, you need to follow these 5 components. If you want to achieve the reporting objective, you need to follow the all 5 components, right? Likewise, everything is connected. That's why it's a kind of a cube, right? Right. To resolve this cube, only you can survive in the market. Right. දැන් Rubik cube Rubik cube එක resolve කරනවා වගේ දෙයක් තමයි අපි internal controls වල කරන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඔයා good internal control framework එක නැත්නම් good internal control system එක effective efficient control system එකක establish කරා කියන්නේ මේ Rubik cube එක ඔයා fix කරා කියන්නේ. කියන්නේ Rubik cube එකේ තියෙන හැම එකක්ම එකිනෙකට connect. Right. එකිනෙකට connect. Right. So therefore everything needs to be there to have a good internal control. So that's the meaning of this Rubik cube, right? So then when it comes to Corso framework, as I told you, in the Corso framework, there are 3 objectives to achieve. To achieve these 3 objectives, you need to have 5 components. So for each of these components, there are 17 principles. 17 principles you need to follow. Right. කොහොමද මේ control environment එක ඇති කරන්නේ කියන එකට principles පහක් තියෙනවා. Right. We have learned this as it's a principle based approach, but there will be some flexibility you can use with your judgment. Right. Right. කොහොමද company එක තුල හොඳ control environment එක ඇති කරන්නේ. So these are the principles which has been suggested by the Cursor frame. So what is the first one? The organization demonstrates the commitment to the integrity and ethical values. As an organization, right, you need to committed to the integrity and the ethical values. Right, committed to the integrity and the ethical values. Right. The board of directors demonstrate the independence from the management and exercise oversight of the development and performance of the internal control. Right. Right. As a board of directors, they need to become independent. And also management, they need to oversight the management in the independent way. Right? Because we know when it comes to the corporate governance, you have learned, right? Board of directors also involved with the management concepts. Right? Some board of directors, we call it as executive directors. Right? They are involving with the management sort of thing. So if they are involving with the management sort of thing, their independence is not there. Right? Even though the independence is not there, right? If you are having a good internal control system, you need to become independent. Right? You need to become independent. Management established with both oversight structures, reporting lines. Right? That means good organization structure you need to have. Right? හරියට organization structure එකක් තියෙනවා. කවුද කාට report කරන්නේ? Right? කාගේද accountability එක කවුද මෙයාට report කරන්නේ? Good reporting line එකක් තියෙනවා. හොඳ structure එකක් තියෙනවා. Authorities හරියට බෙදලා තියෙනවා. Right? Then the fourth point, the organization demonstrates the commitment to attract, develop, and retain competent individuals in the alignment with the objectives. So we are having a different sort of objectives, 3 objectives. Right? To address those objectives, we need to have the competent people with us. You need to retain the competent people. You need to attract the competent people. We need to develop the competent people. Right? But internal control established කරන්න කලින් ඒකට අවශ්‍ය වෙන committed හොඳ talented කට්ටිය වටේට ඉන්නවා. Attract කරගන්න ඕන, develop කරන්න ඕන, retain කරගන්න ඕන. So that is the one principle. The organization hold individuals accountable for their internal control responsibilities. Right? Right. So before having the control activity, you need to make people irresponsible. This is your responsibility. Looking at the raw material count is your responsibility. You are accountable for that. If something is missed, you need to provide the reasons. Right? So if the people will become accountable, they are having a more pressure on the things. So they will not do the frauds. Right? So you have to make the people accountable, and you need to establish the internal control responsibilities. That is the 5th principle. Right? That is the 5th principle. Right? Then the risk assessment. Right? So when it comes to risk assessment, right? Right, what you have to do, you need to follow 4 principles to assess the risk. The organization specifies the objectives with the sufficient clarity to enable the identification and assessment of risk relating to the objectives. Right? So you need to have some sufficient clarity how you are going to identify an assessment of the risk relating to your 3 objectives. The organization identifies risk to the achievement of objectives across the entities and analyze the risk as a basis for determining how the risk should be managed. Right? The organization considers the potential for fraud in assessing the risk to the achievement of objective. Right? Organization එක බලන්න ඕනේ අනාගතයේදී fraud වෙන්න තියෙන සම්භාවිතාවක්. risk එක assess කරන්න. දැන් අපිට තියෙනවා මෙන්න මේ වගේ risk එකක්. හැබැයි මේ risk එක low risk එකක්. මෙන්න මේව අපේ raw materials අඩු වෙලා දිනවා 25ක් විතර. right? ඒක එච්චර ලොකු risk එකක් නෙමෙයි company එක පැත්තෙන් ගත්ත company මිලියනයක් විතර raw material හදනවා. right? හැබැයි issue එක තියෙන්නේ මොකද්ද? මේකේ නිසා අනාගතයේදී risk එකක් ඇති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. අනාගතයේදී fraud risk එකක් එන්න පුළුවන්. Right? මේක පොඩියට පොඩි ගිහින් ලොකු වෙන්න පුළුවන්. So therefore, when you're assessing the risk, even though at this point it is a low risk, you need to look at the potential fraud risk. So if it is high, then you need to consider it as a high risk area. Right? The risk assessment. The organization identify and assessing the changes that could significantly impact the system of internal control. For example, now your company is a private limited company, right? But suddenly your company is going to become a PLC company, right? Right? You are going to list it in the Colombo Stock Exchange, like PicMe, right? PicMe is a private limited company. Suddenly they have issued some shares to the general public and listed in the Colombo Stock Exchange, right? So likewise, if you are having a significant change, it's a significant change from the private limited company into the PLC company. It's a significant change. Because of this significant change, right, the internal controls you are having now is having some sort of a differences compared to the change. So because of this change, significant change, there may be new risk is coming up. Right? Different risk will be coming up. So therefore, you have to assess those things. Right? You have to assess those things. Right? So that is risk assessment. So now we have discussed 9 principles. 5 principles for the control environment, 4 principles for the risk assessment. So these are the principles you need to follow to establish the risk assessment according to the course of framework. Then now we are going to have the internal controls. We call it as control activities. Right? The organization select and develop control activities that contribute to the mitigation of risk to the achievement of objective to the acceptable level. Right? Organization එක select කරන්න ඕනේ සහ develop කරන්න ඕනේ control activities. හරි. Internal control එක select කරලා ඒක develop කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ develop කරපු හරි select කරපු හරි control activity එක contribute කරන්න ඕනේ risk එක mitigate කරන්න acceptable level එකට. Right. So ඔයා risk එක assess කරාට පස්සේ high risk එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒකට අපි select කරගත්ත internal control එක acceptable level එකට risk එක mitigate කරන්න මදි නම් ඒ කියන්නේ එතන අවුලක් තියෙනවා. හැම වෙලේම මතක තියාගන්න principle එක establish කරන්න ඕනේ. හැම වෙලේම මතක තියාගන්න principle එක establish කරන්න ඕනේ. risk එක mitigate කරන්න. Right? risk එක mitigate කරන්න ඕනේ acceptable level එකට. ඒ කියන්නේ tolerate කරන්න පුළුවන් level එකට. ඒක එක්කෙනා ගත්තොත් එහෙම එක toleration levels තියෙනවා. For example, when it comes to John Gill's holding, John Gill Holding is the biggest company in Sri Lanka. Right? So nowadays they are having a kind of problem regarding the BYD. Right? BYD vehicles can issue එකක් තියෙනවා. Even though that issue is there, that company is a very strong company in Sri Lanka. The best company in Sri Lanka. Right? So their risk tolerance level is very high. They can tolerate the risk into a kind of certain level. But when it comes to the, let's say, Tekade, one of your Tekade in the near Bumblebee, is at campus. So what kind of risk they are having? Their tolerance level. Their tolerance level is low. So based on your tolerance level, you need to decide your control activity. And you need to mitigate the risk to the acceptable level. The organization select and develop the general control activities or technology to support the achievement of objectives. Next one is the general IT controls. Right? If we are working in a kind of a technological world, right? Definitely the companies are involving with the IT sort of activities. So therefore, we need to have a general IT controls like passwords, cloud protections, right? Two-factor authentications, likewise, right? You need to design those general IT controls. Then organization deploy the control activities through policies that establish what is expected and procedures that put policies into actions, right? So sometimes when we come to that example, there is a concerns regarding your what you call the operational process, right? Operational process. What you can do is, what you can do, you can do, you can have a good policy, or you can have a good protocol document. So this is the protocol you have to follow. When you are purchasing the raw material, you need to follow this, right? When you are having the order, you need to have the order, and it should be coming through online, and it should be achieved by authorized by the CEO, and again it should be checked by the manager. Likewise, you can have the procedure. Right? That's also a control activity. Right? You need to have a good kind of a good policies, and that procedures you need to put into the policies to take into the actions. Right? Right? You can have a physical controls like CCTV, you can have IT controls like parcel, you can have a policies like controls, right? It's also coming as a control, right? We can have a control in three different parts: physical controls, policies, and the general IT controls, right? General IT controls. That's about the control activity. Those are the principles. Then information and communication. After establishing the control activities, right? After establishing the control activities, right? You have to what? You have to communicate, right? The organization obtain and generate and user relevant quality information to support the function of the internal control. Right? You need to have a good information to support your internal controls. Right? Information information relevant information internal controls in another, you have to communicate. Internal communication communicates information including objectives, responsibilities for the internal control necessary to support the functions of the internal control. You need to communicate to the internal parties, and as well as you have to communicate it to the external parties regarding the matters affecting the functions of the internal controls. Right? Right. So those are the principles which address the information and communication component. Then the final one, monitoring activities. The organization select, develop, and perform ongoing or separate evaluation to ascertain whether the component of internal control are present are and function. Right? දැන් ඔයගොල්ලෝ establish කරපු internal controls හරියට තියනවද? හරියට වැඩ කරනවද? කියන එක ගැන ongoing or separate evaluation එකක් යන්න පුළුවන්. Right? හැම වෙලේම යන්නේ හැමදාම monitor කරන්න පුළුවන්. නැත්නම් separately monitor කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක activity. උදාහරණයකට ඔයාට fraud risk එකක් තියෙනවා. ඔයා CCTV camera හයි කරලා තියෙනවා. policies තියෙනවා. මේ ඔක්කොම හරියට වෙනවද කියලා එකපාර බලන්න පුළුවන්. නැත්නම් policy එක හරියද? CCTV camera work කරනවද? So we can do a ongoing or separate evaluation. Right? To check whether the internal controls are present, all the internal controls are present according to your requirement, and all these are functioning accurately. That you have to check. Then organization evaluate and communicate internal control deficiencies. If there's any kind of a deficiencies you have identified, you need to evaluate it. What is the level of deficiency? It is an acceptable level or not? And you have to communicate it to the relevant parties who is having the responsibility regarding that deficiencies. And you need to take the corrective actions. Right? You need to take the corrective actions. So that is another monitoring activities. Right? That is another monitoring activities. So now you can understand that if you have to have a good internal control system in your company, right? You need to follow this internal control framework with 5 components and the 17 principles. Through this, you can achieve the 3 objectives which is required to achieve through the internal controls. Right? So when we are summarizing this is what you have to remember when you are going for the examination. Right? So I will ask a question from course of framework by giving a case study. Right? So what you have to do is you need to build a internal controls for that specific organization, right? Using this course of framework. So that is a requirement, right? So when you are looking at the objectives, right, you can have firstly under the course of framework we are having the 3 objectives to achieve, right? Under the course of framework, if we are going to have the good internal control system, these 3 objectives will be achieved, right? So therefore, first of all, our intention is to achieve this three objectives: operating, reporting, and compliance. Right. So to achieve these three objectives, we need to follow the 5 components. Right, 5 components. To achieve these 5 components, we need to check whether these 17 principles are there. So therefore, COSO framework consists of 3 objectives, 5 components, and 17 principles. So this is the COSO framework, which you can use to have a good internal control system to your company. Right? Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Yes, any questions? Guys, any questions? මොනවද ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවද? Yes, any practical questions you have? අපේ කම්පැනි මෙන්න මෙහෙමයි වෙන්නේ. ඒතකොට මොකක් හරි මොකද්ද මේකේ තත්ත්වය කියලා මොන හරි එහෙම ප්‍රශ්න වන්ද? Nothing to ask. All right. If you don't have anything to ask. So now moving on to the question, right? Coming through this course of framework, right? Give me a second. So let's have a 2 minutes break. So then we can have a question, okay?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Can you share QR code again?
Okay, I will share the QR code once I finish the what do you call the lecture.
Okay, thank you.
That's the only question you guys are having, right? Question related to the QR code. All right. Let's see a video which elaborate what we have discussed till now. Then we are moving to the question, right? So this question is kind of the same question you are receiving in the examination, right? Same kind of question, not the same question, same kind of a question, which you are going to discuss after this video, right? I just share the video with you. Can you see my screen? Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Hello, and welcome to the Office of Justice Program's Territories Financial Support Center, short video presentation on the integrated framework for internal controls. In this short video, I want to highlight 5 key components for building strong internal controls in your organization. These 5 key components are part of the integrated framework developed in 1992 by the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, also known as COSO. The framework was updated by COSO in 2013 and is widely used and accepted across a variety of organizations and businesses as part of an effective financial management practice. To learn more about this framework, I would encourage you to visit their website at www.coso.org. This video will provide a high-level overview and key takeaways of this framework. This video is also part of a set of materials developed by OJP TFSC that focuses on internal controls. These materials include a short video on implementing an internal controls policy and a job aid checklist, also focused on internal controls. The links to these materials are posted in the description below. So, here are the 5 key components for strong internal controls. There are a few important things to note. First, the order of the components matter. Just as you cannot construct an office building without completing the foundation, you cannot skip steps in designing, implementing, operating, and monitoring this internal control framework. Secondly, the components should not be considered discretely. Instead, they operate together as an integrated system. These components are interdependent with a multitude of interrelationships and linkages among them. So, let's briefly go through each one. Number 1, the foundation for implementing effective internal controls within your organization starts by establishing a control environment. A control environment is defined by a set of ethical values, standards, structures, and processes that have a pervasive impact on the overall system of controls. Often stated as tone at the top, building an effective control environment is directly influenced by the ability of an organization's leaders and managers to embody honesty, integrity, and build an ethical corporate culture. Next is risk assessment, which is how you identify things that threaten the achievement of your organization's objectives. Risk assessment will require management to consider the impact of possible changes in both the external and internal environment that may render internal controls ineffective. At number 3, we have control activities, which are actions performed under the direction of management to mitigate the risks to achieve the organization's objectives. Control activities are performed at all levels of the organization and throughout all stages within the business processes. An example of an essential control activity is separation of duties, which ensure that no single person has multiple roles in an accounting process. Next, we have information and communication, which is the organization's ability to convey information needed to perform control activities. This flow of information ensures that personnel, both within and outside the organization, have a clear understanding of their internal control responsibilities from senior management and that these control responsibilities must be taken seriously. Finally, we have monitoring activities, which involve identifying policies, procedures, and practices that are not working and correcting any identified deficiencies. This involves ongoing evaluations built into processes at different levels of the organization. To help better visualize this integrated framework of internal controls, COSO has developed a 3-dimensional cube representation of the key concepts. The 5 key components, which I just described, are represented by the rows that go across the cube. The 3 objectives, operations, reporting, and compliance, are represented by columns. These objectives are what your organization strives to achieve. Operation objectives pertain to the effectiveness and efficiency of your organization's operations, including operational and financial goals. Reporting objectives pertain to the internal and external financial and non-financial reporting that encompass reliability, timeliness, and transparency. Compliance objectives pertain to adherence to laws and regulations that your organization is subject to. The organization's levels of structure are represented in the 3rd dimension, allowing you to consider internal controls from individual, divisional, or operating units and/or functional levels. We know that organizational structures will vary across different types of organizations and agencies. The key takeaway here is that building and maintaining strong internal controls is a shared responsibility that cuts across all levels of an organization. Finally, I want to highlight the 17 integrated framework principles, which represent the fundamental concepts associated with the 5 components. You will see them listed out here, categorized along each of the 5 components. Because these principles are drawn directly from the components, your organization can achieve effective internal controls by applying all these principles. For a closer look at these principles, I would encourage you to review the handout by COSO. I have included a link to this handout for your reference in the video description below. In summary, the 5 key components of internal controls are needed to achieve the objectives of your organization. This system of internal controls will require the support of your entire organization to carry out their respective duties regarding internal controls. Again, I would encourage you to visit the COSO website to learn more about the integrated framework. As you can see, establishing and maintaining a strong system of internal controls is an involved process that will require everyone working together to achieve the mission and goals of your organization. Using the framework and other resources developed by COSO and OJP TFSC, you can create an environment and culture that supports strong.
Now I think you can have a kind of idea, right? What we have discussed, right? So with that knowledge, I'm going to a case study question. So I have shared some questions, right? Which will be practice questions for you. So these are taken from the previous past papers, right? Which I have prepared for your what do you call the previous badges. Right. So you have to move to the question number 4. Right. Question number 4. Right. So I read the question. Sri Lanka Cricket Limited is a leading supplier of gardening and agricultural products. First of all, I will give you 5 to 7 minutes to read this question and give some answers. You can give the answers through chat box, okay? Read the question and give the answers like in a point form. Don't write a huge paragraph in point form. Yes. Anyone write an answer? Yes. So what are the operational risks you have identified in this case? Yes.
They use the manual system.
All right. They use the manual system. Okay. So what is the risk here? Because of the manual system.
Manipulate the invoices and orders and sales value.
All right. Okay, that's one. Yes, any other thing? Good. Very good. Okay, I just read the question first, right? Sri Lanka Cricket Limited, right? So now Sri Lanka Cricket Limited is not doing the cricketing thing, right? They are supplying gardening and agricultural products. Catering to the both retail and the wholesale customers. They are selling it to the retail customers as well as wholesale customers. The company operates across multiple divisions, each specialized in distinct product lines such as seeds, garden tools, and fertilizers. Right? They are having a different divisions, right? Seed divisions, right? Garden tools division and the fertilizer division. To ensure the operational efficiency and the mitigate potential risk, right? Sri Lanka Cricket has an internal audit function that regularly review companies' operations, right? So they are having an internal control. As an internal control, they are having an internal audit, right? Internal audit also a kind of internal control, right? Internal audit function is there to ensure the operation efficiency and they are mitigating potential risk. And it explained about the seed division now, right? The company seed division is a significant revenue generator, right? Seed division එක තමයි වැඩිපුරම revenue generate කරන company එකට. Customers can purchase seed packets online, right? So what will happen? Seeds packet online purchase කරන්න පුළුවන් customers, right? Provide credit card details and selecting the product using specific codes. There's specific codes are there, like you know the online platforms, right? Specific codes are there, so you can select the specific codes and you can do the online payment and you can have the online order, right? So once the order has been placed through the online, right, it has been manually transferred to the inventory and the sales system, right? Order එක online එනවා, හැබැයි order එක pass වෙන්නේ manually, right? Inventory division එකට. Give me a second. Right? The order has been passed manually. Right? And also it generated two parts of package slips. Slips දෙකක් generate කරනවා. Right? Warehouse staff pick and pack orders based on the packing slip. Right? Packing slip එක අනුව warehouse staff එක order එක pack කරනවා. Sending one copy to the account department for the inventory and sales update and charging the customer's credit card. Right? Then they are sending one slip to the account department to update the warehouse and the sales and also the credit card payment. Despite internal controls, the company experienced a 4.5 bad debt rate. So even though they are having a kind of a process, right, they are having a bad debt rate of 4.5. Right. So identify 4 different operational level risks within Sri Lanka Cricket Limited seed division. Right. Yes. What are the operational risks you can identify? Yes. What are the So let's look at the names. Afra, yes. Any operational deficiency you have identified? 073, yes. Melanie, yes. Have you identified any? No one is answering. Why? So no point of doing like this. You are not answering. Why? You have to answer. So as one student said that there will be some they are everything they are doing in the manual way, even though the operations what you call um, uh, the orders are coming online, but some of the more important things are coming manually, right? So therefore, right, what are the what do you call the risk you can identify? One is because you are having a manual data entry, right? Because you are taking the online order and that has been passed manually to the warehouse and the accounting division. So therefore, there's a high probability that human errors can be happen, right? Mistakes of account, customer details, product codes, right? Order quantities, right? Right? So it will create some problems, right? Order quantity එක වරදින්න පුළුවන්, customer ගේ නම වරදින්න පුළුවන්. වෙන customer කෙනෙක් ඉල්ලපු එකක් තව එක්කෙනෙක්ට යවන්න පුළුවන්, තව එක්කෙනෙක් ඉල්ලපු එක වෙන එකට යන product codes එක වරදින්න පුළුවන්. Because it has been manually transferred. The orders has been manually transferred because it says this is the significant revenue generator. That means there are so much of orders definitely coming up. So these orders you need to handle manually. So therefore, one operational level risk is manual data entry errors can be happen. That's a risk to the company because there will be some human errors may be involved, right? Then after you get in the order, right, it will generate two slips, right? So one slip is passed to the warehouse and they are pack the order, right? Once they pack the order, then they pass the slip to the account division. Then only you are charging from the customer, right? So there will be some delay in billing, right? Delay in billing, delay in charging the credit card, and also you are getting it from through the credit card, right? So what will happen because of the delay billing, right? There will be high probability of having bad debts. Why? Why? Because sometimes the card that because of that time lag, right? It will increase the risk of the card can be expired. It will sometimes the transaction will be cancelled. Right? Sometimes those who are having order they don't have the sufficient balance in the cards, right? So this has been make some uh, create some bad debts to the company. That's why it says even though you are having a good internal control system, right? Even though you are having internal control system, the high probability of having a bad debts, right? And then when it's come to the inventory management, there is a risk of inaccurate inventory management, right? Right, because the inventory, the warehouse and the sales has been updated once the packing slip has been come into the account division only. It will have some delay, right? Time gap, right? So time gap will generate some sort of a inventory management issues, right? Because to update the inventory management, it will take some time, right? To update the inventory amount, it will take some time, right? උදාහරණයක් විදිහට order system එකේ පෙන්නනවා seats අපි ගමු එක seats වර්ගයෙන් 10ක් පෙන්නනවා. හැබැයි මේ වෙද්දී ඒ 10ම order කරලා. හැබැයි inventory update වෙලා නැහැ. මොකද තාම slip එක ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. Right? So therefore it is difficult to manage the inventory. Right? It is difficult to manage the inventory. Inaccurate inventory management. Right? Right. And sometimes when you are fulfilling the order, right? When you are fulfilling the order, right, there will be some risk of incorrect order fulfillments, right? Sometimes you are shipping the wrong seed packet, right? That will create some dissatisfaction. There will be create some customer risk. Customers will return, right? It will create, if the customer is returning the product, it will create additional operation cost. Then cover return කරොත් ඒ product එක ආපු additional operation cost එකක් කරනවා. ඒකට attend වෙන්න එපා. Right? So it will be a risk, right? So those are the few of the operational risks which have generated through this case study. Right? Inaccurate inventory management, order fulfillment risk is there, customer risk is there, right? They are not satisfied, right? Because sometimes there may be a possibility that sometimes you are delivering wrong products to the wrong customer, right? And when it comes to the paying, it's delaying the billing, right? It will create some high probability of having a bad debt, right? And when you are doing it, everything is manually, the human errors can be involved, the risk of human error can be there, right? So those are the operational risks you can face, right? Then what are the mitigation strategies you can follow for each of these identified risk, right? The first risk you have identified for the manual data entry error. So what you can do? What is the risk response? Risk
We
of
can
manual data
implement
entry.
an integrated order management system, like automatically sync with the online orders with inventory and sales.
Yes, correct. Right. So since you are having the online order system, you can link it with the other aspects as well, right? Like once the order is placed, so that should be passed to the warehouse directly, and also for the account division to update the inventory, right? Everything should be automated. If it is automated system, then you can minimize the human errors to somewhat, right? Right. Then for the what you call the high debt possibility, delaying the payment, what we can do? So in this case, what happened is when only the pay slip, when only that slip is coming to the account division, they are charging from the customer. So what we can do? Instead of that pay slip, they can charge from the customer at the when the customer places the order, at that point you can charge, right? You can charge, right? Don't wait until the slip is coming through the warehouse, right? It will kind of make shorten the period of payment, right? And for the inventory management, how we can do? We can have a kind of a real-time inventory tracking system, right? A real-time inventory tracking system, right? Like we can have a kind of a platform that we can track the inventory in real time, right? Once the order has been placed from the tracking system, the inventory should be deducted. The inventory balance should be deducted, right? Once the, let's say one seed category is finished their inventory balance, so it should be indicated to the ordering division to order more seeds or to fulfill the inventory balance, right? Likewise, you can have a real-time inventory tracking system as a strategy. And incorrect order fulfillment, what we can do? You're fulfilling the inventory orders in incorrect way. Like sometimes you change the customer, sometimes you change the product category, you are delivering it to the wrong customer, right? It will create some more operational costs, as well as there will be some dissatisfaction from the customers, right? Create some customer risk, right? So what we can do? What are the strategies? So normally in such kind of situation, most of the companies are doing, they are using a barcode system, if you see that, right? In the barcode system, you are having the what you call the online slip you are receiving from the online customer. In the slip, in the barcode, it has been generated. That barcode specified the relevant seat category, right? Right. So then what you can do? You can paste that strip, and you can have the product, and the product also it has the barcode, right? So once you have scanned those two barcodes, then if it is got match only, you can pass that product. That means the same product the customer has been requested, you are going to see, right? So you can use some barcode system, right? Warehouse staff, what they can do is they can scan both the packing slips and the item, right? Then if it is only match, then you can see, right? And also you can do some final checkups, right? Before passing the product to the customer, someone can check your product against the order, right? Whether it's correct order. ඔගොල්ලෝ ෆාමසි එකට ගියාම ෆාමසි එකට ගියනම දැකලා ඇති. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ටිකක් ලොකු ෆාමසි එකට ගියාම ෆාමසිස්ට් කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. එයා බෙහෙත් දුන්නාට පස්සේ ඒ බෙහෙත් එක තව එක්කෙනෙක් බලලා තමයි ඔයාලට දෙන්නේ. right. මොකද බෙහෙත් එක එකක් වැරදිලා ඕඩර් එකක් ගියොත් එහෙම මොකද වෙන්නේ? මට දෙන්න ඕන බෙහෙතක් ඔයාට දෙනවා. right. මොකද වෙන්නේ? right. right. මොකද වෙන්නේ? right. ඒකට රිස්ක් එකක් ලොකු රිස්ක් එකක්. ඒ වගේ එකක් වෙන්නේ. දැන් මේකට සීට්ස් ඉන්න අවුලක් නැහැ. මෙඩිසින් නම් ඕඩර් එකක් වැරදිලා ගියොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? right. ලොකු කේස් එකක්. You can have a kind of a final checkup before going into the customer. Someone can check again and see whether that order is okay. Right. So those are the strategies we can follow. Right. So likewise, you have to write a kind of a practical answer to such kind of questions. Right. Is it clear? Yes. Is it clear? Any questions? Guys, is it clear?
Yes, sir. It's clear. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Yes. Any questions, guys? Can you hear me? You guys are waiting for the QR code. Huh? All right. So I hope it's clear. No one is answering. Only one person is answering. Thank you for that. Right. All right. If you have any questions, you can ask. No questions. All right. If you don't have any questions, so let's wind up the session for today. So if you have any questions, you can ask from me. You can drop me an email. Right. My email is there. Right. You can drop me an email. And next week we are having a session, and yeah, one. And sometimes another session will be there. Then afterwards you have the presentation. So you have to prepare with the presentation. So now only you can you can select the company, you can do the risk management, and you can do the internal control framework of that company, right? And if you want any assistance, please contact me. So I will provide the guidance, right? Right. So if you don't have any questions, let's wind up the session. I will share the QR code to scan your attendance, okay? Okay, once you have scanned the QR code, you can leave the class. Thank you very much for participating. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.